Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how Rishi Sunak is facing opposition from his own MPs on his plans to, as he calls it, stop the boats, even though the policy was only invented to keep his MPs happy in the first place. The problem seems to be down to the details, as with Brexit and any number of other Tory policies. Conservative MPs sort of like the sound of the aims, but not the way it works in reality. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the old issue of immigration and the Tories, there was a time when they would blame immigrants for their failures, promise to do something about it, do nothing about it, blame the EU, rinse and repeat. Only Brexit made a bit of a mess of this tidy little arrangement. All of a sudden, the blame the EU step sort of falls down. In fact, as a result of leaving the EU, the issue of immigration has become way more visible, and the external forces like Nigel Farage shouting at the sea, who cornered the Tories into their acts of self-defeating stupidity in the first place, have got no intention of covering for them. So here is the Conservatives' new problem. They like distracting the public from economic and healthcare failures by pointing at asylum seekers crossing the channel because there are no safe routes for them. If they dealt with the problem by actually processing the claims, like we used to, then the problem would go away, but then they'd have nothing to distract voters with. But the issue is now that Reform UK are attracting more than a few votes by saying that Tories talk a good game, but they're not delivering. Or we'll do it better. Vote for us and we'll do it better. All very messy. So Tory MPs are now demanding that the government deal with the issue. However, they don't want it dealt with by actually processing the claims, because they then worry that this will be seen as just as big a problem as exists now. See, in their minds, the problem is not migrants held in hotels or former military barracks or even offshore hulks. The problem is that the migrants exist at all, or they at very least are here at all. So they want Sunak to come up with a practical solution to deal with their issue. Not the issue, their issue. Problem is that their practical solutions are completely unworkable and also create new problems for MPs. For example, one consequence of removing asylum seekers stuck in our endless system from hotels is that you need somewhere else to house them. The government are saying, well, we'll use disused military bases. But the Tory MPs who represent the areas that these bases are in don't like that either. Or at least they pretend not to like it. Earlier this week, Labour put forward a motion to give local authorities a say in these plans, but the Conservatives voted it down, voted against it. The following day, one of my local MPs, the human beetroot Edward Lee, was complaining that his local authorities are not getting a say in these plans, despite having voted against Labour's proposal to do just that the day before. Classic case of an MP standing up in Parliament and saying something for the record and then tweeting it to their constituents. They go, oh yeah, he's standing up for us, he's standing up for us. But votes a different way, safe in the knowledge that no one's going to check how he voted. But this is one issue for Sunak. In theory, he could solve it by transferring the asylum seekers to Labour councils, but the suitable sites tend to be in Conservative areas. That's bad luck. The other problem is that this idea of housing asylum seekers on former military bases or even offshore barges, it's not transferring them from hotels. As Labour pointed out this week, these plans are for extra capacity because the backlog of cases keeps growing because they're not processing the claims. We have a double whammy here, really. On the one hand, there are now more asylum seekers since we left the EU, because we left the Dublin Agreement, which used to mean that some asylum seekers wanting to seek asylum in the UK would actually be diverted to other European countries. Dublin Agreement. We chose to leave it. So now we handle all of our own applications. The second issue is that we're processing claims at a lower rate than applications are made. So the numbers just keep going up, meaning we need more and more accommodation. And I see no signs in the plans to actually increase the rate of processing applications, which is the only thing that will actually deal with the issue. There are lots of things the government can do to make the problem less visible, like building a processing centre in France, not a detention centre, a processing centre. If they process claims in France, and the French authorities have got no issue with this, then the channel crossings would go down to zero. If anyone did make that crossing, we could just bring them back to our facility in France. They're not on British soil, no problem. Nothing for Farage to whine about. I mean, he'll find something, but he'd have a lower chance of getting people to listen to his ranting. Oh, the boats! Yeah, we're taking the boats back to France. Oh, the boats. Yeah, they're going back to France. Nigel, we're going back to France, mate. But there seems to be an added problem for Sunak. I see from a report that some Tory MPs are saying that Sunak promised that the issue of channel crossings would be dealt with by the end of the year. Now, I don't know what he may or may not have told them in private, but I can say that he did not say this in public when he announced his 5 pledges in January. He said that he would halve inflation this year, but that was it in terms of the timescale. None of his other pledges had a time on them, implying that the deadline for the other 4 pledges was the general election next year. In fact, Sunak's pledge on the stop the boats doesn't technically even mean he'll stop the channel crossings at all. That's not what he really promised. There might have been an implication. The pledge was passing legislation designed to deal with the issue. But the Tories have already passed legislation designed to deal with the issue, and lo and behold, the issue just got worse. That being said, if any voters care about the pledge, they will judge him and other Tory MPs on the numbers, not the record of legislation passed. But although Sunak can say he never promised the issue would be dealt with by the end of the year, that doesn't necessarily help him with his potential rebels. These Tory MPs who are chafing at him over this, people like Lee Anderson, are convinced that this is the issue which will give them a chance to retain their seats, mostly in the Red Wall, not exclusively, mostly in the Red Wall. They know that the issues which won them the election in 2019 are gone, that the seats are going to revert back to Labour unless a new factor enters the equation. They know that getting Brexit done doesn't work because Brexit is considered to be done by these voters. So they turn their attention to why so many people in those Red Wall seats supported Brexit in the first place. It was not exclusively, but it was largely an expression of anti-immigration sentiment. This is why they're not interested in Sunak just processing the claims more efficiently, something which would actually deal with the problem, the real problem. They need asylum seekers to be physically ejected from Britain. Or so they think anyway. You know, I could argue that they could actually make life better for these communities and then win votes that way, but they're Tories, they're not about that. They prefer solutions that make lives worse, not better. But it is a problem for Sunak. If these same MPs feel that the problem needs to be demonstrably dealt with by the end of the year, and they may be thinking to themselves it needs to be done by the end of the year because they need time to promote the good news in their constituencies far enough ahead of the election itself. They don't, in other words, they don't want to give Reform UK time to establish themselves. Then it poses a problem for the Prime Minister. See, let's imagine that by the end of October, there is little to no progress being made on dealing with the issue as the Tory MPs see it. This is the point at which Sunak can once again face a confidence vote with the normal 15% of Tory MPs needed to trigger it. We know there are currently 22 Tory MPs willing to rebel against Sunak over pretty much anything. If another chunk are willing to do so over what they think is the issue needed for them to realistically challenge for their own seat at the election, and then another chunk of Tory MPs are willing to do so over something else, then Sunak faces problems. But it's not even like there's anything he can do about it. Like, processing the claims quickly deals with the real problem. Processing claims in France deals with the visible signs of the problem. But it's not the problem or even the visibility of the problem that concerns these MPs. It is immigration in general. The irony being, of course, that messing up immigration since Brexit has actually made these mostly northern communities poorer, not richer. But the problem which they identify is not only fictitious, but the solutions that they want to apply to their fancy problems are not lawful. This is why they're going on about the, European Convention on Human Rights. And it doesn't seem possible for the Tories to apply a political solution in order to mislead voters, because I mean, that they would have done that years ago quite happily. But Reform UK are just going to blow the lid on the whole con. They will point it out. And there's plenty of courage in the Tory media will back them for it. Tricky times. And Sunak doesn't even have the rest of this year to sort it, because if these Tory MPs are expecting the issue to be dealt with by the end of the year so that they can go to their constituents in the new year and say, look, we said we'd deal with it and we've dealt with it. So all these other things we say we're going to deal with, we will deal, because we are people of our word. So that presumably means they expect to see visible progress by the end of this summer, because no one imagines the problem's going to remain all the way to November and then suddenly get fixed in like 3 weeks. I'm not sure this is going to occur. And if Boris Johnson's still hanging about at this time like a fart in a broken lift, then Sunak could come under more sustained pressure unless he can engineer some wins from somewhere else. And remember, throughout all this stop the boats thing, this is not a priority for the public. You can see from polling, members of the public only consider it a more serious issue when the media are pushing it. And when the media go quiet on it, all of a sudden it drops right back down the scale again. But even with the media pushing it, it's still nowhere near as serious an issue as healthcare and the economy. So Sunak has only come up with this policy to placate a chunk of his MPs who think it is their silver bullet for sinking their challengers in the next election. He's doing it purely to keep his MPs on side. But those same MPs want to see progress. And they're not going to. Tricky. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.